Well, we finally made it. Cleveland Browns, welcome to the UK. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, the Cleveland Browns travel to London to take on the Minnesota Vikings, week 5. I will of course be there. Can't call yourself UK Browns fan and then not go to the game when the Browns come to the UK. So I will be there going down to London on the Saturday. Not far of a journey for me, just an hour train. Looking forward to all the festivities and of course the game. We'll try and get as much footage and stuff from the game as I can to share with you guys. But for now, before I go, gonna preview this game, give my thoughts on the game. So I will jump straight into it, not waste any time. Of course, this game it's an international game, of course, everything that comes with that. But the biggest storyline of this game for the Browns is Dillon Gabriel starting in his first regular season game for the Browns. The Browns obviously deciding to bench Joe Flacco, what is in my opinion the right decision to do. You can go check out my previous video on it if you want to hear my thoughts on that. But Dillon Gabriel becomes the Browns' 41st starting quarterback since 1999. Since reactivation, we are of course going to hear all about that, I am sure, in the broadcast. Thankfully, I will be at the game. I will not be watching the broadcast, so I won't actually have to listen to it, thankfully. And he will be the 13th different rookie out of those 41 quarterbacks as well. So obviously, that's the biggest storyline going into this game. The Vikings have had to travel less to this game. Obviously, they played in Dublin last week in that loss against the Steelers. The Browns travelled on Wednesday, practiced in Berea on Wednesday, then flew down, and then obviously practiced in just outside of London, pretty much about 45 minutes away from me, at the Grove. That's where they practiced and stayed the last 2 days, Thursday, Friday, and obviously we'll be staying as well on Saturday. So the Vikings, of course, have had more time to climatise to the UK, more time to climatise to the the time change, everything that goes within that, the jet lag, etc., etc. So will that be an advantage for them? We'll obviously see. But even with that kind of maybe slight advantage with the travel stuff, maybe 2 months ago, we add this into it. We were complaining about it at the time. This Vikings team looked like a pretty formidable team. Looked like a pretty unfair advantage for a team that was clearly going to be a lot better than the Browns were. But this game has gone from what back then looked like as I said, a really tough task a couple of months ago, to now looking like arguably a fairly winnable game for the Browns. And that is because, of course, the biggest storyline for the Vikings is all of the injuries that they are facing, especially on that offensive line. They are down 3 starters on that offensive line, only got 40% of that starting offensive line out there. And they're not just down 3 starters, that includes the backup centre as well as the starting centre. So they're having their backup guard start at centre in this game. Blake Brentnell, I believe is his name. He has never started a game or played any snaps at centre in the NFL. He's of course apparently done it in practice and stuff like that, but this is a guy that has never done it in an NFL game live action. So they are pretty much as thin as it gets on the offensive line. They are dealing with a lot of offensive line problems. Of course, the Browns, similarly in the last this year and the last couple of years as well, felt like they've dealt with injuries like that as well. And we've been in that same situation as the Vikings are. Our offensive line is nothing to shout home about in its own right, but this Vikings offensive line being as injured as it is, and obviously some of the other injuries they have across the team as well. Factor that in with the starting quarterback, JJ McCarthy, who was of course meant to be their quarterback this year, him getting hurt and everything that went with that. This is a 2-2 football team, a team that has not been as good as obviously everyone expected them to be, because of mostly because of those injuries, especially obviously at quarterback, having to go to their backup, and then their offensive line getting decimated. So looking at the Browns defense going up against this Vikings offensive side of the football. Of course, there are some still great players for the Vikings. Justin Jefferson is one of the best wide receivers in the league. Jordan Addison, one of the best twos in the league. TJ Hockenson, one of the better tight ends in the league. There are some great players, and that one of the two actual healthy offensive linemen is their better offensive lineman in Christian Darrisaw. He's their best offensive lineman, so they do at least have that going for them. There are still talented players on that team, but as I said, that Vikings offensive line is decimated. So the Browns defensive line has to feast on Sunday for this team to have a chance to win this game. We've seen this Browns defensive line be phenomenal through the first 4 weeks. They've been great. They have to dominate the line of scrimmage in this game. You don't want to give them a chance to get the ball into Justin Jefferson's hand, get the ball into Jordan Addison's hands, get the ball into TJ Hockenson's hands. You want to keep the ball out of their playmakers' hands, and the best way to do that is by not allowing Carson Wentz to get them the ball, because you're in his face, within as quickly as you possibly can, and you're causing duress for Carson Wentz. And we've all seen how Carson Wentz can turn into a disaster when he's got guys constantly in his face. He's constantly got pressure, in his face. So everything that goes with that, that's the number one thing for this defense going up against this Vikings offense is, just don't let them get the ball into their playmakers' hands. And that obviously starts with the pass rush. That starts with getting to Carson Wentz, putting him under duress, causing as much pressure as you can, and obviously, hopefully, then that pressure convert into sacks as well, and keeping his bottom on the ground rather than upright and throwing the ball deep to Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison. As I said, there's still good players on this team. You have to be careful. The Vikings were able to still put up 48 points on the Bengals with Carson Wentz a couple of weeks ago. And, yes, of course, the Bengals defense is far worse than the Browns. And yes, of course, half of those points, were scored by the Vikings defense. But, our offense only scored 16 points against that same defense. They gave up 4 touchdowns to Wentz and obviously Jordan Mason. Wentz, threw for the same amount of touchdowns in that game that Flacco has through 4 games for the Browns. So, that and Wentz has actually put up more points in both games that he's played for the Vikings this year than the Browns have in any game this year. So, AKA over 17 points. This defense, obviously looking at it on paper, looking at how decimated this Vikings offensive line is, obviously looking at all the narratives that surround that and everything that goes into that, you expect this Browns defense to dominate on Sunday. I expect this Browns defense to dominate on Sunday, and especially obviously the defensive line and that defensive front. And if they can cause as much pressure as they can on Carson Wentz, force him into making bad decisions, don't let them get the ball into their playmakers' hands. Play the run defense that you've played so far this year, being the number one run defense in the NFL so far through the first 4 weeks. Not letting Jordan Mason score 2 touchdowns against you like the Bengals did, and playing as well as you have, being as consistent as you have been through 4 weeks. Then that's obviously going to put this Browns team in a great position to win this game. Then it just comes down to the offense, and obviously, the offense is, of course, the biggest question mark. How does the offense look with Dillon Gabriel out there now, as I mentioned, with him being the starter? Can the offensive line hold up with the additions of Cam Robinson? Perhaps even Jack Conklin in this game. He has been upgraded to full participation today in practice. He is questionable for this game. It's been reported that he may be actually able to play in this game. So, get not both your tackles back. Obviously, Cam Robinson a new tackle, but get Cam Robinson in there. Maybe get Jack Conklin back. Shore up that offensive line, and hopefully the Browns can play better offense than they have shown in the previous few weeks. And with Dillon, I mentioned it in my previous video. I do think there's things that they can do with Dillon that will actually improve this offense. I do think just the fact of them actually having a more simple game plan will be more beneficial, because the more simple the game plan, the more kind of conservative you play, the less likely obviously you are to turn the ball over, and that's been the biggest killer for the Browns in these games. Their defense have pretty much kept them in these games, and it's been a turnover by the offense, or obviously the special teams have had some bad plays as well. So, and that's what's kind of turned those games around. So, a more simple game plan might actually be more beneficial for them. I spoke in my last video again about Dylan and what I think that means for the offense. You can go check that out, but I just think his strengths is getting the ball out quickly, playing within structure. People think that he can't throw the ball downfield. He can throw the ball downfield. I implore anyone to go watch his Oklahoma tape, where of course Oklahoma, if you're an Oklahoma quarterback, you're expected to be able to sling it, and he was slinging it when he was at Oklahoma. Of course, at Oregon, he was asked to operate a more kind of operate more within structure, a more kind of West Coast scheme, not kind of a more kind of air raid scheme. And that to me showed his ability to be coachable and adaptable, and obviously learn different schemes. And as I mentioned, shows his ability to operate within structure, operate within the scheme. He does what the scheme asks him to do. He does what the play asks him to do. And I think pair that with Kevin Stefanski and his offense, what he likes to run, that can be beneficial to this offense. Versus obviously having a Joe Flacco out there that, as I mentioned before, maybe looks downfield a little bit too much and can make some silly decisions there and then. But as I said, obviously the biggest thing will be the offensive line. Can the addition of Cam Robinson, maybe Jack Conklin coming back, hopefully the interior can improve. That's the biggest thing. This offensive line has to hold up. They can't be as bad as they have been through the first 4 weeks, especially when they've got a rookie back there. So if they can hold up, Dylan can do the things that I think that he can do, and that I expect that he can do within this offense. I do think the Browns do have a better chance of moving the ball and at least being somewhat of a competent offense. But of course, we will find out on Sunday if the offense looks as worse as it did under Flacco. Then we'll obviously learn more about Dylan. But this is a very, very good Vikings defense that they are going up against. As I mentioned in that in that Bengals game, that was like record breaking, some of the stuff that they did in that game. Of course, mainly centered around Isaiah Rodgers. You want to keep the ball away from him at all costs. And Brian Flores as the defensive coordinator, he can be a crazy defensive coordinator at time. He is a great defensive mind. He has a record of torturing rookie quarterbacks in the past. The Vikings are going to blitz a lot. He likes to mix up those blitz packages. He likes to blitz a lot. It's a big if, but if the Browns are able to get the ball out quick, as I mentioned with Dylan, that is something that he can do. He's got a quick release. He can get the ball out quick. If they're able to do that, avoid that initial wave, give themselves just enough time, they could potentially look to exploit this Vikings defense. I say could and a big if, because obviously we've not, this offense has not shown anything to suggest that they're going to be able to do these things. But obviously with Dylan coming in, yes, it's a rookie. You should of course expect rookie mistakes and of course the growing pains that come with starting a rookie. But I do just think some of his strengths can contribute and maybe counteract some of the strengths of that Vikings. You use that Vikings aggressiveness against themselves. Sometimes we've seen teams do it against the Browns. The Browns defense, use their aggressiveness against themselves. If the Browns are able to do that with Dylan, as I mentioned, someone that is going to, run the play as it's meant to be run, someone that can get the ball out quick, especially in those blitz scenarios. They send 6-7 guys. You're able to get the ball out. That's a lot of green guys for someone to run into. And but the biggest factor, for this offense in this game, as I mentioned with the offensive line, obviously holding up going forward, and that obviously coincides with the run game. We've seen improvements since Quinshon Judkins come back. Is that just because Quinshon Judkins is that good and he's been able to run behind a shit O-line and an O-line that continues to be terrible in the run game? Maybe, but maybe last week was, and the week before was a slight improvement in the run game for the Browns. I mentioned Cam Robinson coming in earlier. This is the first year in his career he's actually graded out higher as a run blocker than a pass blocker, and is actually graded out league average as a run blocker, which is is an improvement of what the Browns have had at tackle so far this year. So that should obviously help the run game in some sense as well. Kenneth Gainwell, not exactly the best running back in the NFL. He rushed for 99 yards against the Vikings defense last week. The Vikings pass defense ranks number 3 in the league in yards allowed, and that's their biggest strength, as I mentioned earlier, with that pass rush with Brian Flores, and how crazy he gets with those blitz packages. But their run defense does rank 24th in yards allowed. The Browns defense is a more consistent defense. The Vikings are a more aggressive. They get after you. They get after the passer. They also cause turnovers, and that's something that they do better than the Browns. They had more turnovers in that Bengals game than the Browns have had all season. But the Browns defense is more consistent in terms of being good against the pass, good against the run as well. The Browns have like the number 4th or 5th best pass defense and the number 1 run defense, whereas as I mentioned, the Vikings rank number 3 in yards allowed in pass defense, but their run defense is 24th in yards allowed. So establishing the run game, getting Quinshon Judkins going in this game, maybe getting Dylan Sampson going in this game as well. That's going to be massive towards this Browns offense being able to move the ball. Having a run game, of course, helps your rookie quarterback as well. That's massive. When you've got a rookie back there, being able to rely on a run game, is so important. So if the Browns are able to get that run game going, that's going to help massively in this game. It's not going to be easy, but if the Browns defense can keep this Browns team in the game early, like they have in pretty much every game so far, I do think there are ways the Browns can potentially break this Vikings defense down. And at the end of the day, it comes down to playing clean, complementary football. We scream it every week. How the defense plays well, the offense plays crap, the special teams plays crap, or the special teams might have a good game with the blocked the field goal, in the next game they have a terrible game, and the offense is, whatever. They just don't play complementary football. So, if the offense can avoid turning the ball over, and of course special teams as well, and at least somewhat move the ball, get into some opportunities to score some points, then they can win this game. This game might end, 0-0, but they can win this game, whether it's 3-0 or 6-0, if they are just able to somewhat move the ball, get into scoring positions, played clean football. Hopefully with Dylan in there, the turnovers will decrease. You haven't got Flacco, who even in 2023, during that great run. That of course we all appreciate and are all going to remember probably as Browns fans for the rest of our lives. Even in that run, he was turning the ball over a lot, but back then it was okay because he was also putting up a lot of points and a lot of touchdowns and a lot of yards. Whereas now, when you're not putting up the points, you're not putting up the touchdowns, you're not putting up the yards, and you're still turning the ball over a lot. Leads the league in interceptions this year so far through 4 weeks, entering week 5. Leads the league in total turnovers. So the Browns have turned the ball over 8 times on the offensive side of the ball in 4 games. That just is not going to cut it, and not when they're scoring as few amount of points as they are. As I've mentioned before, if you're turning the ball over once or twice a game, but you're scoring 40 points a game, it's not quite as bad versus if you're turning the ball over once or twice a game and you're scoring less than 17 points every game, and you're having to rely on your defense not giving up that amount of points. So, whilst also putting them in bad field position because of the turnovers, or just giving up touchdowns because of the turnovers, as we've seen. So, that's what it comes down to. The Browns defense, I expect, even going up against a healthy Vikings team, yes, of course, you're scared of those receivers, and that offensive line is obviously a lot better when it's healthy. But I would still expect this Browns defense to play well as they played through four weeks. They played a very good Green Bay Packers offense, played well against them. The defense actually played quite well against the Lions, other than Jahmyr Gibbs. He was able to break through a couple of times. They played well against a healthy Joe Burrow in week 1 and that offense. So this Browns team, this Browns defense I would expect to play well even with a fully healthy Vikings offense, but especially with Carson Wentz, the backup quarterback, back there, 3 of their starting offensive linemen out. I expect this Browns defense to dominate in this game, and that's going to be the biggest thing. Is they can just wreck this game essentially. Then they're not even then asking the offense to do that much. As I mentioned, just somewhat be able to move the ball, take advantage of the good field position that you would get from the Browns defense wrecking the game. And put up, and score the points in those situations and take advantage of those opportunities, then you're going to put yourself in position to win this game. So, yes, I think the Browns can win this game. Am I crazy? I don't know. Let me know. Maybe 2 months ago, if I was saying this, you would definitely say I'm crazy. But as I said, this looks more and more like a winnable game as the week has gone by. As I mentioned earlier, even with Christian Darrisaw, their best offensive lineman, being healthy. I say healthy, he's coming off of I think it was an ACL injury from last year. His first game coming back was last week. He didn't practice the 2 of the 3 days this week because of rest, because obviously that was his first game since coming back off of that injury. So, he's coming back off that injury. They're down 3 of their starters on the offensive line. They're down some other players. They're out some other players elsewhere as well. On the defensive side of the ball, Andrew Van Ginkel is out. So, this is a very winnable game for the Browns, in my opinion. Of course, we'll have to see if maybe there's just some Browns traveling to an international game bullshit and they're just destined to lose. Maybe the Vikings, being down here a week earlier and being able to get used to the jet lag. Maybe the Browns are so jet lagged that they're a slump in this game and they lose this game. But at the end of the day, they got here on Wednesday. They've had 4 days. They would have had 4 days to get used to the jet lag, get used to the time zones. I think they'll be all right, and I think this is a game that is winnable for the Browns, as I mentioned, which is good news because, of course, I will be in attendance for this game. Would be great for my first time seeing the Browns in London, for them to come away with a win. And obviously, that guy, Myles Garrett, probably, if that's the case, getting heavily involved within that win, and having a good day, and this Browns defense having a good day as well. But, probably to outsiders, this is an absolutely terrible game. They're going to, I've joked that maybe this is the most hilarious, quarterback matchup in London game history. You've got rookie quarterback Dylan Gabriel going up against backup quarterback Carson Wentz. Quite the quarterback matchup. I'm sure the neutrals aren't going to be too thrilled to be watching this game, especially not at 9:30 in the morning Eastern time. I highly doubt many non-Browns fans or Vikings fans are going to be watching this one over in the States. But as a Browns fan, of course, no matter how bad the Browns were or how bad the Browns team is, I was obviously going to be excited for this game. But add on the fact that I then think this is a winnable game. Add on the fact that I get to see Dylan Gabriel. The Browns identified him as the quarterback they wanted. Yes, he's a 3rd round pick. Of course, it's not a 1st round pick. There's obviously less expectations, but they obviously believed in him enough to invest a top 100 pick into him. And he's a rookie quarterback. Everyone knows the kind of romance that goes into any when your team starts a rookie quarterback. How much you root for them. So for that to happen in London, for him to make his debut in London, us British fans, along with the obviously American fans that have made the trip, get to have the luxury of being the ones that see him make his first start. I'm of course looking forward to that. Looking forward to this Browns defense hopefully wrecking that Vikings decimated offensive line, having a field day out there with Carson Wentz, and obviously putting him on his bottom as many times as they can, getting as many sacks as they can that I can shout about in the stands and cheer about. But that's my thoughts on the game. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think this is a winnable game? Am I maybe a bit too optimistic for this? Are the Vikings actually a lot better even with the injuries? Let me know. But as well, anyone going to the game, anyone that's down in London this weekend for the Browns, for NFL London, drop me a comment, check the links in the description, drop me a DM on any of my socials, let me know. Trying to meet as many people, as many Browns fans, as many of the people I've interacted with on here, on my socials, throughout the weekend. So anyone going, just let me know. And you know, I hope you guys, if I don't see you, have a great weekend. If you're just watching at home, have a great weekend. And if I do see you, looking forward to it. And you know, have a few beers and watch the Cleveland Browns hopefully get a win against the Minnesota Vikings. But that will do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit the subscribe button. It's free, but it really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy, because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing weekend. As I said, whether you're at in London or not, have an amazing weekend. Enjoy this game, whether it's at 9:30 in the States or obviously 2:30 here in the UK. But most importantly, as always, go Browns.